What's going on, guys? Quick video here. So today there was an announcement of kind of this think tank, and I'll just show you right here. So I went ahead and recorded this. And it's basically just a think tank group, okay? So the areas that they're going to be focusing on are listed here. I'm going to have this link in the tweet or whatever, so if you guys want to look at this later. This video was a big nothing burger in terms of like Jerome Powell. He was just announcing that, okay, cool, they're doing this. That's pretty much it. Sometimes he sneaks things in there. Today he did not. So if you guys want to watch this, there was some pretty good discussion in here. I actually asked a question. There wasn't very many people publicly that were watching this. It was like me and maybe like 20 people total in the room. And I asked a question. They touched on a lot of the things, and there's some commentary there. These guys sound open to innovation and stuff like that. Let's go ahead and get into the video. If you guys want to watch it, I appreciate it. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up and smash that subscribe button, and we'll go ahead and get into the video.
That they've had?
That's a really good question, and it ties with what with the advice Amy was giving us earlier, which I could really strongly relate to. And this notion that when you experiment, small is beautiful, and you don't want to boil the ocean, and you want to start small, and then you see if it works, or if you fail. If you fail, you start something different, and if it works, you can build on it, but step by step. And well, to give you an example, we know that CBDC is a very hot topic in the central banking community. Our aim is not to build a CBDC architecture. That wouldn't make sense from a BIS perspective because it's so national. It's so rooted in national laws, national preferences about privacy. Different financial structures, different roles for banks and non-banks, and so on and so forth. So we don't want to go there. We want to test. We want to answer to problem statements that the central banks are putting to us, and it has to be small. So one example is settlement. We have this project called Jura between with the Swiss National Bank and also now with the Banque de France. And we're answering a very simple question, which is how do you settle a digital asset on a blockchain in central bank money? And it's a very, very focused question, and we've looked at different ways to answer it. You may want to settle your assets using central bank money that you want to push on the blockchain. And that's wholesale central bank currency, a central bank token, if you want. You may want to settle your transaction using some kind of messaging to the RTGS system, and that would be the traditional way to settle. And if it's a cross-border transaction, it kind of multiplies the number of options that you have. And we've been looking through all these options, and in a few days, next week actually, we'll publish the report that just goes through the option, compares the pros and cons, and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of things we're doing, looking at a very, very specific question which central banks are asking, which is kind of similar across the central banking community to help them move faster. And maybe to be more comprehensive, we've also tried to do that with as many partners as possible. We are really trying to follow Amy's advice that we should be broadening the conversation to players which are not the natural interlocutors of central banks. So we want to reach out to the DeFi community, for instance, and understand what they're doing. We're not regulators, so it might be easier for us to do that. We just want to learn from them, what they're doing, how it works, and how we can connect their world with our world, and what are the technological options. And we're also working with a number of central banks around the world, even beyond the central banks that are host to innovation hub centers. So if you take all multiple CBDC platforms being currently considered by the Innovation Hub, we have 10 central banks as partners in total around our projects. In Hong Kong, we have HKMA, of course, we have Thailand, we have the Emirates, and we have the People's Bank of China. In Singapore, we have the Reserve Bank of Australia, we have the Central Bank of Malaysia, We have the NAS, of course, and we have the South African Reserve Bank. And as I said, in Switzerland, we work with the SNB and also with the Banque de France. So, I mean, to put it simply, we really want to broaden the conversation.
So as I'm doing this recording, you can see that I've asked my own question, and I'm going to see maybe I get a response on that.
It just occurred to me that Benoit, there's a really unique opportunity here in New York, particularly in the U.S. or New York specifically, that I'm part of a larger ecosystem at Anthemis. It's about 10,000 people wide, and it's occurring to me that in my experience so far in my 30 years, I haven't ever met Raj or Noreen, and that to me feels like you've already tapped into the ability to convene a different crew of people to have a conversation, and I think it'd be quite wonderful to use some of the efforts of what you guys are doing to be a catalyst for those conversations, right? Because I think it's easier for you to bring people from various different worlds together to have these conversations than it is for us from inside the world to then say, hey, we'd love to meet this person or that person. And you seem to have done it already on your first initial way out the door. So I think that could be a really exciting way to progress.
I agree. I think we have an important role as that convener of the conversation, particularly, as we can do more things in person, hopefully soon. We shall see. Per, I want to follow on Benoit's point. He was talking about the projects that are happening across the other centers. Can you talk specifically about New York? We have a question here. What types of projects will be the focus of the New York Innovation Center?
So Amy and Benoit set the stage very nicely with their comments around the importance of focus, and that's a critical success factor for us. So the problem that we have today isn't having too little areas of interest.
So I was kind of hoping there real quick that was going to be my question, but there's no other questions here, so I don't know where they pulled that one from. We'll see.
And are going to be the areas where we can deliver the most value through our experimentation and through the work that we're performing. So to that end, we've defined 5 opportunity areas that will be the start of our work. These are really the themes that we'll focus on, the areas that we'll invest our time and energy and resources into. And the 5 of the number 1 is supervisory technology and regulatory technology. So clearly the supervision responsibility is a key activity of the Federal Reserve. And there's really a great opportunity to do that in a more effective way, both from our perspective, but also relative to the organizations that we supervise today. So if you think about advances in product design, advanced data analytics, artificial intelligence, these sorts of characteristics, there's simply much more we could do and probably much better relative to that category than we are today. Number 2 are financial market infrastructures. So this category really relates to the enterprise technology that's specific to activities like payments and settlements, trading systems, those sorts of things. This is particularly interesting from the perspective of the New York Fed and New York in general, where these types of activities are core to the work that we do. And some of the most interesting innovation that's taking place today is really happening within this geography. So it's a neat opportunity for us, given our location and given the other organizations that are also in this area. Number 3 is what we call the future of money. So this relates to all of the digital currency related work that we'll focus on. So you heard Benoit mention central bank digital currencies. This is a critical area of focus for us also, but could also include work specific to stable coins, cryptocurrencies, and other areas that might be relevant from our perspective and for the central bank community. Number 4 is what we call open finance. Open finance contains all of the work that's related to new bank and non-bank financial institutions that are benefiting from new business and operating models, such as banking as a service, open banking, open data, decentralized finance or DeFi, and others. So these are important areas for the Federal Reserve to understand what's taking place, what is the evolution of financial services relative to these new types of models. And even if some of these new organizations that are launching in market today aren't currently supervised, or we don't have a relationship with them, they may be supervised in the future, and we may have a relationship with them in the future. So there's a critical need for us to understand and have a point of view of what's taking place in this area. And then the final category is climate risk. And our focus on climate will really be one specific to utilizing more advanced data analytics to understand more accurate and more true cost of the climate change that's taking place today. So these are the 5 opportunity areas that we've defined and that we'll focus on today. And also Raj's earlier comment about agility, I'll just respond to that again, where although these are the 5 that we're starting out on, the pace of change has never been faster. Things are happening all the time. And it's highly likely that these will evolve over time also as the market changes and there are new areas of need and new high impact opportunities for us.
Thanks. I'm going to open this up to all of you, but there's a theme of questions here on how should the public sector collaborate with the private sector? And do you have suggestions for how we should do this? Specifically, one person asked, well, it's easy if you're a global tier 1 bank, but how do we do it more broadly? So, Amy, maybe we'll start with you, but Benoit, I'd love to hear, what other hubs have done, or Raj, your opinions on this as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all do a better job of building that muscle for, getting the right people in a room and having earnest and honest conversations. And so I think it's just, you just do it. I know from an Anthemist perspective, a big part of our job is, of course, deploying capital in support of investing in companies, but equal to that is the time we spend having conversations with all the incumbent insurance companies, all the incumbent financial services organizations, in many cases, some of the regulators across Europe and around the world, and as well some of the biggest fintechs out there. And I think there's probably more that can be done to encourage the public sector in those conversations, because they're not proprietary per se. It's just about getting the right people in the room and having the conversation. And I also think it would be helpful because a lot of the work that you're talking about doing is already being done in other ways. And I think people are quite happy to share a lot of this work, particularly when it's non-combative. And I've never been in a scenario whereby people get into a room and properly workshop or ideate on something and haven't come back with something that's valuable to execute on. So I mean, it sounds simple, but it's just figuring out how to bring the right people in the rooms and have the conversations. And again, don't boil the ocean.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, which is it's getting the right people in the room. And it's interesting that, many of us haven't connected with each other in a pair. Benoit, as you talk about CBDCs and crypto and data analytics and AI, and you talk about, product design, we're doing a lot of this too. So getting together and talking about it, I think, and just getting going on it, it's a good idea. So, take Benoit talking about CBDCs, right? I mean, we support it globally. We're working with many central banks. Each country, each central bank is different. The needs are different. And it's complicated, right? I think Chairman Powell said at some point that it's more about getting it right than doing it fast. I'm paraphrasing. And so, really thinking about, the complexity of it. It's a complex undertaking. Thinking about the roles of the private sector and the public sector. Thinking about interoperability. Thinking about security. Thinking about how can we make it additive versus, just replicating what we already have. All of this can be done together. We can put our heads together and do it. And, it's interesting. Benoit mentioned small and sandbox. It's we have a testing environment that we're working with several central banks with, right? To really think about, how a central bank can issue it, design it, validate use cases, etc. So I'd love to, talk to all of you about it as well. So I'm using that as an example to underscore Amy's point, which is we should just get together and talk about some of these things and see what we can do together and start small.
But when you talk about 4 or 5 adjustments, maybe just, and also measuring it as a KPI, making sure that we're actually measuring these conversations and the people that are being spoken to, and that we're mixing up the groups a bit. Even doing that as part of the work of what you're doing at the New York Center would be huge, because I think it keep us all accountable and keep the conversation. I've already flagged that we need to find a person to be our coordinator amongst it, but I think it's a great initiative.
Great. Benoit, I don't know if you had anything to add in terms of how some of the other centers are collaborating and lessons that we can learn from them.
Yeah, I think it's it has to be a combination of different ways to cooperate. We are partnering with private sector companies on all of our projects, of course. It has to be on a competitive basis. It has to be transparent. So you find the names on our website. You can judge whether it's diverse enough. Probably not enough because we're just starting. So as we expand, we want to reach out to a larger number of partners or potential partners. So that's for the projects themselves, but there are different ways to reach out. We have, for some projects, we've created advisory committees where, you know, stakeholders or players which are not part of the project can still have a say, comment, criticize, and also comment on you know, how this would interact with what they're doing. As Raj was suggesting, I mean, how this would interoperate with what they're doing with their own platforms, and so on. It's a role of our center heads to interact with the local fintech community, of course, and they're doing it a lot. We do conferences, we do workshops, we do, as I said, we do hackathons, which are really a nice way to reach out to smaller tech firms. I mean, the big guys are also coming and applying, but we can have very good surprises in terms of smaller firms joining our hackathons and sometimes winning even. And so it has to be a combination, and we have to keep an open mind, and we very much expect that with a larger number of centers across the board and globally, we can really cover a larger part of the fintech universe. We very much count on the New York Center to also help us reach out to the fintech scene in the US and in New York.
Great point. I think we might have lost Raj, but hopefully somebody's getting her back. Hera, there's several questions around, if you were a fintech, how do you reach out and partner with the New York Innovation Center? How do you get involved? Is there going to be a process in place? Themes like that. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So I'm really glad you asked that question. And following on some of the earlier comments, collaboration is absolutely a critical success factor for us. So the New York Innovation Center will have a focused team, but the way that we'll really be successful over the long run and specific to the projects that we have is by bringing together the right partners to collaborate on each one of the different opportunities, each one of the different projects that we're executing on. So I'm a big believer in Joy's law. So Bill Joy was one of the founders of Sun Microsystems, and one of the things that he said was many of the smartest people in the world work outside of your organization. So one way to be successful is to try and find them and involve them in the work that you're doing. I view really the New York Innovation Center as a node in a network. So we're a central node in an innovation network, and we'll want to find and collaborate with the subject matter experts who are truly the deep experts in the specific areas that we're focused on. We'll also want to collaborate, for example, with organizations that provide us with execution capabilities. So engineering resources, product development resources that we'll use ultimately to execute and deliver the work that we're focused on doing. So that's a key part of our model. It's critical for our success. And right now, I would keep it super simple. You know, if you're an organization and you think that the work that you're doing is very much in line with one of our opportunity areas, or you think you could contribute effectively to some of the interesting problems that we're trying to solve, please reach out to us. So there's the New York Innovation Center webpage that you can access through the New York Fed website. There's an email there where you can get in touch with us. And I would encourage you simply to reach out, read the information that's on the webpage, try and decide if you think what you're doing is an interesting fit with the work that we're doing, and feel free to reach out. You know, I'd love to talk to you and see if there's the opportunity for us to collaborate and try and solve some of the big interesting problems that we're focused on.
Great, thank you. Raj, I see we got you back. Good to see you again.
Yes.
Since you're back, I'm going to ask you a question, and but everybody else chime in too. One thing we're doing in the New York Innovation Center is building the team. So, you know, any advice to us from a human capital perspective? You know, what is the skills and the mindset that we need to focus on as we build this out? I appreciate your experience and perspective.
Yeah, no, what I would say is, the world around us is changing rapidly. There's so much going on around us, and agility, evolution is key. But at the same time, there's one thing that remains constant, and that's people, right? Making sure that you have the right people focusing on it within a company and across, with your partners is really important. And the key to that is what Amy said at the beginning, which is you want diversity of thought. You want people who look, act, think differently from you. So for example, on my global team, I have something like 70 nationalities and 80 languages and all kinds of different skills. It's that blending of that diversity of skills and thinking that is really important, because that's where the ideas come from. And so, as we navigate against, into new spaces like AI or digital or, data or, cybersecurity or CBDCs, this is even more important because that's where the creativity comes from. And so I would say, there are things that we do around people that are important. For example, you want to empower everyone to own their own careers. You want to empower everyone to own their own learning, to think about, to listen and learn from them as to what they need, whether it's wellness or whether it's frankly time for innovation in a virtual world. So which could be, a Flex Friday, or it could be, a half a day off or a full day off at some point. It's important to think through, to really foster innovation and creativity. You want to keep your ears and eyes open and to be able to react and create the opportunities so that the people are empowered to do whatever they need to do to look at problems from different points of view and to create and collaborate together. So I would say, but underscoring all of that is diversity and teamwork.
Great, thank you very much, Amy. Anything you would add from your perspective?
Yeah, I'd say the quickest way to kill diversity is to take a very top-down heavy approach, right? You've got to allow for conversation. You've got to allow for creative flexibility. Diversity has to be everywhere because you're not going to have, the best idea isn't the one that everybody agrees on. And I think just recognizing that, hiring for values really matters to this generation of creative thinkers. And sometimes, particularly if you can't compete on salary or some of the other perks that sort of some organizations can offer these days, I think people are less sensitive to that. I think people really want to know that they're working in concert with people who care about the same things they care about.